Yeah, this is the space for fathers, for families, for the future. I am dad, stand proud. Yeah, I am dad, standing strong, raising voices where we belong. For the children, for the love, guided by the strength above. Safe space where the fathers meet, stories flow with the steady beat. From the pain to the joy we share, every voice is welcome here. Lord, I am dad, we rise together, building love that lasts forever. Community strong, our hearts are true. Father shine in all we do.
Welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you for joining us for another episode. This year has already started out fast and furious. Oh my God, the conversations that I've had with individuals and the people that I continue to meet across discipline sectors of human service has been incredible. But what I love about what I'm hearing is how the conversation of fatherhood is seeping into areas that we have worked for years to see happen. And I believe it is happening now, and it is evident in the people that I am talking to, both new people and old friends, like our guest today. I'm honored to welcome Christopher Brown, president of the National Fatherhood Initiative, the nation's leading provider of fatherhood skill building resources and practitioner training. For more than 2 decades, Christopher has helped shape the modern fatherhood field, developing evidence-based and evidence-informed programs used across the country. An applied anthropologist who has studied masculinity across culture, he brings both intellectual rigor and practical wisdom to the conversation about what fathers need to strive. Most recently, he co-authored the $154 billion Man, the Economic Argument for Investing in Fathers, a groundbreaking report that reframes father absence not only as a social issue, but as an economic one, quantifying the national cost and calling for strategic investment in fathers' capacity, presence, and economic strength. Let's bring Christopher to the stage. How you doing today?
I'm great, Ken. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
It's been a long time, and you and I could probably do like a 3-hour podcast, but we won't do that to people yet. We might have to come back and dig deeper into some other subject matters. And so, before I get started, I was around when you all did the $100 billion. And I remember when that came out, and it was kind of like, okay, this is good, but what do we do with it? Like, what do we do with it? And I think it has been the years of working in this space that when this one came out, and as I was reading through it, I was like, oh, okay. I see the tea leaves on this one. I see where this makes the sense in this field. But I also think, Chris, that it was timely because at this particular juncture in the space, we are in spaces that you and I never thought we would be in 20 years ago with fatherhood. And people are trying to understand this. They're trying to operationalize this. They're trying to put it in programs. They're trying to put it in processes and procedures. And they're trying to figure out how to make the economic dollar sense to the work that they're doing, because we can't get to the moral sense. The moral sense is fathers should have rights. They should be involved. They should be served. And we want everybody to have a heart for fathers. We have seen that doesn't necessarily work. And so we got to start talking to the numbers. What are we investing? What are we losing? What do we need? And how is that distributed across the veil? So I want to thank you all for taking the time. And Dr. Jessica Pearson, who I love, who is always on the front lines of research and telling the story and breaking things down and analyzing. And I think it was a perfect relationship between you and her to kind of really put this together and put it out there. So I just publicly want to thank you guys for the work that you've done with this report.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So we start our podcast off with an icebreaker. And that icebreaker I give to everybody, I don't tell them how to tell their story, but I know that everybody has this story. And it is simply tell us your daddy's story. And however you want to tell that story, you could tell that story.
You bet. Well, I appreciate that. So, I grew up with a father who was resided in our home until I was a senior in high school. My parents eventually divorced, and the marriage between my parents was a poor one at best. They were pretty good partners in terms of running their household and doing things to, put clothes on our backs and food on the table. But in terms of their relationship, it was a really poor one. And my father was the type of father that, we sort of often highlight at National Fatherhood Initiative, which is uh, a father that lacks the either willingness or ability to be holistically involved in his children's lives. So he put food on the table, but he was not involved emotionally, intellectually, or spiritually in our
Mm,
lives. And you wouldn't have known that if you were just an observer looking at our family. I mean, we were, a middle class family. My father taught at the local university. He was well respected. He led the music program at our local church, and so we were sitting in pews every Sunday. I was singing in the choir along with my younger brother, and we were the quintessential American family. Back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But
mm,
if you walked into our house, you would have seen a very different picture, Ken. And
mm,
that picture was basically a lack of interaction between my father and me and my younger brother. And so I grew up just really without a good role model of a father. And
mm,
our relationship deteriorated to the point where I was absolutely over the moon happy when he left.
mm,
And that did a world of good for me and my younger brother, and also for my mom, who clearly stayed in the marriage much longer than she should. And at National Fatherhood Initiative, we talk about the importance of marriage and how that can bond fathers to their children. But we also acknowledge the fact that not in every case should a marriage stay together. And this was
right.
certainly the case with my parents. At
Mm,
any rate, fast forward to when I was in college, and I started dating my wife, and I really realized that this was the woman that I wanted to marry. When we married and then had children, I was clueless about how to be a good father. And ironically, I had just come on board with National Fatherhood Initiative the year before my older daughter was born. And I had committed to, even before then, working with other men to heal the father wound.
mm,
The previous president of National Fatherhood Initiative, Roland Warren, who I know uh, paints this incredible picture that is of a hole in the soul in the shape of your dad. And that's how
mm,
he talked about the father wound. It's like you walk around with this hole in your soul that you're constantly trying to fill. And so
mm,
I was fortunate to be able to connect with some other men when I was in graduate school who also had a father wound. And we worked together to help each other heal. It was really my first exposure to the power that's behind support groups for men. When men come together and are vulnerable and willing to be emotionally intimate with one another, amazing change happens. I know you see it in your Gentle Warriors Academy all the time. We see
mm,
it in the program, in the organizations that run our programs as well. So,
mm,
I made a decision at that point to use my anthropology training to address this issue, because at the time, which was in the late 80s and early 90s, there was this body of research being built around how important fathers are to child well-being. How many of the symptoms of poor child well-being we spend so much time addressing are correlated with father absence. And so, National Fatherhood Initiative was forming around that time, 1994. And I had started to do some work. I'm in Texas. I'm basically a native Texan. I started to do some work locally to address this issue. And what ends up happening is a good friend of mine, who I know Michael Hayes, who
Mm-hmm.
was running one of the first statewide fatherhood initiatives, learned that there was a position open in National Fatherhood Initiative. He made me aware of it because he knew of my passion around this issue and my skill set. And he said, "Look, I think you'd be good for this position." And long story short, I was hired by National Fatherhood Initiative, and I've been there ever since. So, really, my personal mission, Ken, has been to ensure that as few children grow up with the experience that I had,
Mm-hmm.
uh, not having an involved father, and to help men become the types of fathers that they were meant to be, and ultimately that their children and family need them to be.
Yeah, the cool thing that I've watched, you know, up close and from afar with NFI, and we're actually talking to Mr. Warren right now. You may see a cameo appearance of him soon. We've been having some conversations about some work that we're going to be doing later on this year. When you talked about the hole in the soul, I remember him talking about that. It actually became part of this thought process around being clear about terminology, right? Because when we started, we would hear the word fatherless a lot. We still hear it sometimes, but we don't hear it as much. And over time and over our evolution, I realized how wrong using that word was, right? Because there is no such thing as a fatherless child. 100% of all biological children born on the face of this earth has a father. The question is never if he exists. The question is where he exists. And because we never ask where he is, we make the assumption that he doesn't exist. The problem with that is we tell our children he doesn't exist, and they have no way of explaining that hole in their heart, because that hole in their heart exists as a result of his existence. And
Yeah.
so it is father absence that is our issue, not fatherless is not our issue. And when you spoke about your dad, you explained it perfectly in that sense, that presence isn't always part of fatherhood, because absence is what typically has the most impact on children. And you could be in the same household and still be absent. So the work is around
Absolutely.
how do we reduce the amount of father absence in the lives of our children. And so from an evolution, because you already answered my other question, which was how did you get into this work? What have you seen as probably the biggest shift in how you think about father that has taken place for you since you started doing this work?
Yeah, I'd say there's two shifts. One is sort of on the individual level, what we're seeing with these younger generations of fathers, meaning Gen Z and millennial fathers. And
Mhm,
then what we're seeing in terms of the infrastructure in this country, in communities, that has grown by leaps and bounds. Organizations like yours, Ken, Fathers Incorporated, that are actually doing this work to help fathers and their families. So, when I began this work and I joined NFI in 2000, it was a real struggle to convince human service organizations. And when we say human service organizations, we mean just really broadly based any entity in communities, regardless of sector, that's doing some kind of service for families. And we saw just this almost complete absence of proactive and intentional and proactive efforts to engage fathers. So, we've done a great job in this country of creating an infrastructure around maternal and child health, and certainly there are issues with maternal and child health, as you know, that we need to improve upon. But we have those services and those programs in communities, and so what's been left out of the equation in terms of strengthening families is the father, and there are
mhm,
some cultural issues why that is more of a challenge to involve fathers, and we could get into that discussion and talk about that for hours. But
mhm,
um, as we evolved as an organization, a National Fatherhood Initiative, we realized that the biggest role that we could play in this work is to help change that infrastructure so that it resembles a true whole family approach to the
mhm,
work that human service organizations are doing. To understand that, yes, you can reach mom and you can work with her and her children. But if you're doing that in the absence of working with the father, you're not really working as effectively as possible to strengthen entire families. So our role at National Fatherhood Initiative has been as much about organizational cultural change as it has been about the programs that we provide and the resources we provide that help these organizations work with fathers. Because years ago, and this was soon after I started the work with NFI, we did a study of Head Start programs in Texas. We went around and did a lot of research trying to figure out, for those Head Starts, which Head Start nationally was really the first federal program to sort of proactively invest in fatherhood programming. We wanted to understand, well, what makes the difference between a Head Start program that has a really good fatherhood effort and one that doesn't? And it was so clear. It was the leadership. It was
Mm-hmm.
staff buy-in. It was whether policies and procedures were being changed so that it was easier from an environmental perspective in each organization, in each Head Start, to effectively involve fathers. And
Mm-hmm.
so there was a concerted commitment. So we started to develop lots of different resources and training around that to help lots of human service organizations to change their cultures, because that's what was a key to success in sustaining fatherhood programs, particularly in organizations that are not quote unquote fatherhood organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first change that I've seen. We're also seeing some research in the Pew Research Center, which does a lot of fantastic research, was one of the first to do this with millennial fathers, that younger generations of fathers attach much more of their identity about who they are to being a dad. They don't just see it simply as another role, like being an employee or being a husband or being a partner or being a co-parent, whatever. They see their success as a father as being central to who they are as people. And I
Mm-hmm.
see this with my son-in-law. So I'm a relatively new grandfather. I've got a 21-month-old granddaughter, and I
Mm-hmm.
just watch my son-in-law, and I mean, he just naturally does this, and I can see in his decisions about what he chooses to do with his life that being a father is central to that. So we see the younger generations of fathers demanding more opportunities to balance work and family.
Mm-hmm.
And I even see this, on playgrounds when I'm out just with my family or with my wife, just kind of hanging out. Just the way that the younger generations of fathers are interacting with their children is really encouraging.
Yeah, I was as you were speaking, and I want to ask you this question because I really like to hear it from you as to, in your mind's eye, um, who seems to be getting it right, right? Because there were several people. I can also remember HUD doing some stuff a long time ago and looking at creating programs on HUD properties to do
Yeah.
some fatherhood work. SAMHSA at one point had kind of talked about some stuff with respect to fatherhood. TANF has always kind of talked about it. And we kind of dibbled and dabbled in the health space, and then obviously have probably fallen the hardest in the labor space, right? Which I'm going to talk to you about in a few minutes. But of the entities that are coming into the space now, large body industries that are coming into the space, or issue driven individuals, who's at least seem to be getting it right? They're coming in the right way.
Yeah, well, I mentioned Head Start just a little bit a few moments ago. Certainly, there are many examples of Head Start programs across the country that are doing a wonderful job engaging fathers. I would also highlight Healthy Start. So
Yes.
you've got 100 federally funded Healthy Start programs that have absolutely committed to father involvement, and so many of them are running fatherhood programs. It's just amazing. But that's
Hmm.
because they've institutionalized the importance of engaging fathers proactively in what they do, and they essentially require, the locally funded programs to do this work. But there
Hmm.
are also many state level Healthy Start programs as well that aren't federally funded, but carry the same name and basically do the same thing. that are doing some wonderful work in this space. The other I would call out is the federal home visiting program, uh, called, referred to as McV, the Maternal and Infant Early Childhood Home Visiting Program is what it stands for. And they're doing amazing work one-on-one with families and communities. In fact, you know, when we initially created our fatherhood programs, they were designed exclusively to be run with groups of fathers, which is the most powerful environment in which to initiate change with dads. But we found that so many of the organizations we were partnering with were modifying our programs to be used one on one.
Hmm.
That just like any good product or service developer in the for profit space, you find oftentimes that your resources are used in ways that you didn't intend for them to be
Right.
used,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And as a consequence, there are opportunities to have even more impact if you just listen and watch and observe what's happening.
Hmm.
And so many home visiting programs were modifying what we were our programs for use one on one. So we started to dabble in doing specific trainings in that regard, and then we eventually released one on one versions for most of our most popular programs. And
Hmm.
so they're doing some great work at the state level as well. And as you may know, one of the things that we have recommended, along with some other organizations and individuals who lead in this space nationally, is that from a federal funding perspective, OFA could look at the funding model for home visiting and learn a lot from that in terms of improving what is being done federally to
Hmm.
invest in fathers as well. And that's a whole other conversation. But I would say, Head Starts, Healthy Starts, and the Federal Home Visiting Program are three of those entities
Hmm.
that are doing some really great work. And then there are a number of states who are doing some work. But one of the things that we still need to see at the state level is more institutionalization or institutionalizing of this work. Because
Hmm.
I tell you, and I know you've been around long enough to see this too, Ken. At the state level, we see these fatherhood efforts come and go. I
Yes.
mean, when I first came on board with National Fatherhood Initiative, there were a lot of state level fatherhood initiatives. Some we worked with, some we didn't, but they
Hmm.
started to wane, around 2005, 2006, and they've only recently started to rise again. But one of the other things we're seeing that's very encouraging is um, certain state agencies institutionalizing this work as well. You've got one there in Georgia, in the Georgia Department of Public Health. They're doing some really great work with their health related programs that are under their purview. We've been working with them for 5 or 6 years now, and there's some other state agencies that are doing the same. So we need to definitely see a lot more happening at that state level, which, by the way, and I know I'm kind of running off at the mouth here, but you're
You're
giving me an
not.
opportunity to do that, is this $154 billion man study. One of the things that as you know, in reading it, I mean, we've recommended that some things really need to take place at the state level. And one of the things that we did with this report that's different from the $100 billion man study that this basically updates
Hmm.
um, is we developed with the Center for Policy Research a 2-page document on exactly how you use this. So whenever somebody downloads the report, they'll get this document as well. So
Hmm.
we want it to be actionable. We don't want people just to read it and go throw their arms up in the air and say, "Oh my gosh, we're spending all this money." And by the way, it's a very conservative estimate. We want
Hmm.
to put some tools in their hands for how can you leverage this at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm watching now, so we've kind of, again, because you and I have been around so long, we've seen this kind of evolution of things, and things actually manifest itself that we've always wanted, right? We've always said we wanted more fatherhood research, right? And now what we're seeing is more fatherhood research. Like I'm seeing fatherhood research all it seems like every doctoral student out of every
I,
college in the
I can't keep up with it. I cannot keep up with it.
Right? And so I don't think research is our issue anymore. It used to be our issue. It's not our issue anymore. Conferences and convenings, right? When you and I back in the early 2000s, very few conferences, one or two, maybe three, was taking place in the country. Now everybody's having a fatherhood conference. Every state's having one, counties are having one, cities are having one, people are having one. They're all over the place, right? And then the advent, and I'm going to come back to you and talk about this, which is, what do you see as the impact that social media has had on this conversation around fatherhood, right? Because it has also created its own kind of space, right, of work that it does. However you view it, it's still a part of the fabric of the work that we're trying to do. But I think the one thing that we're still missing is a central convener, right? Every other industry has a convener, whether it is an association, whether it is a group that hosts an annual event that brings all sectors to the space, right? And then that space is where we cultivate all of our ideas, all of our thoughts, all of our partnerships, and then we figure out what policies we need to go after, how we assist and collaborate and partner with each other. And somehow we keep missing that one. And so every time I've brought it up to someone, someone has always said, "Well, then you need to start." I'm like, "No, not me. I'm past that space right now." Um, then and then the next question is then who? And I was like, "That's a great question because I can't answer that question. I don't know who. I just know that it's needed. I just know that there needs to be an entity that is housing and convening all of this work that you and I have done over the 20 some odd years, and several others have done, in one place, so that we don't get to another space where we lose institutional knowledge and progress, so that we don't have to start over again." And I'm desperately trying to figure out where that starts or what that looks like. And so, what I am hoping, and I see you doing it, and I see others doing it as well, I think about this, Christopher, when I think about people like Dr. Mincy. I've had conversations with Dr. Mincy around who is the holder of your institutional knowledge, right? Where is it? So that it doesn't get lost in the unfortunate, right? And so that it doesn't become just part of, oh, we used to have this person. We used to know Charles Ballard. We used to know Dr. Ron Mincy. We used to know Ron Haskins. We used to know um, several other people, Howard Sullivan. We used to know those people, but where is their institutional knowledge being held and formed so that we're not, it's like, I had someone the other day, I was at an event and I was going to respond to it, and I said, "No, this is not the space, Kenny." And they said, the comment was, I'm paraphrasing, here is one of the OGs of the fatherhood space, who helped started this work in fatherhood. I'm listening to him, I'm like, no, it didn't start with me. It did not start with me. It started long before me. And my thought was, but how does he know that? That was the question I asked myself when he was saying that. How does
Yeah.
he know that? When you look at the evolution and where this is going, because I want to roll this question right into the Billion Man Report. When you look at the evolution of this work, if you can foresee 15, 20 years down the road for responsible fatherhood, what do you see?
You know, I'll talk
I know
about
that
what
was
I
a lot.
want to see. I have no idea what it's going to look like 15, 20 years from now. But
Mm,
what I would like to see is that most of us have worked ourselves out of a job.
mm,
That's what I would like to see.
yeah.
I don't necessarily think that that's going to happen. I think some of us will evolve as we have at NFI, and I'll talk about sort of the convener piece in just a second in terms of our evolution. But where we will perhaps evolve to providing more and more niche services, programs, resources for all of these fathers who want to be the best fathers that they can be, because our culture is going to demand that
Hmm.
of them.
Hmm.
And that's I see that happening, that change happening. So, you asked about a convener. So that was one of the key roles that National Fatherhood Initiative played in our early existence,
Hmm.
as you may remember. And so we were the first organization that held a national summit. That was in 1994 or five in Dallas, and we held the what was considered the national conference on fatherhood for about 10 years.
Hmm.
But as we saw more and more organizations doing these types of conferences at the state and regional level, we decided we could have more impact by going to those places than holding a national conference, because we were starting to see, the attendance being siphoned off and those kinds of things, which was
Hmm.
fine. We didn't hold on to it. We have always had an approach at National Fatherhood Initiative where if something's no longer working, we just get rid of it, and we just move on to do something more impactful.
Hmm.
But when we did that, and we really didn't think about it at the time, and I really didn't think about it too much until you asked the question right now. That left a void in that space. There are a couple of good national conferences that have been done for a number of years, as you know. NPCL, Jeff Johnson's group, does a wonderful conference. It's an internationally focused one, and also James Rodriguez with FFCA does a good conference, and a lot of people go to that.
Hmm.
But I think what you're talking about something that's even broader than that, that can bring together this institutional knowledge and act as a convener, or some kind of a rudder, if you will, for this work on a national level,
Yeah.
that doesn't have a pony in specific things.
Right.
Now, I have seen since we sort of gave up that convener role, there have been a number of attempts to bring fatherhood leaders together,
Hmm.
to have dialogue and discussion about creating some kind of an entity. And each one of those has obviously fizzled out for a variety of reasons. So I don't know who that should be. It's not going to be, National Fatherhood Initiative again,
Hmm.
unless someone else comes in after me and decides that that's what we should do, you know. But I do think that I think it is important that we capture that knowledge, because um, you know candidly, those of us who have been leaders in this field for a number of years are aging. I mean, you're going to start seeing people retiring. You've already started to see that.
Hmm.
I am encouraged. There are a lot of great younger leaders emerging in this space, and I have no doubt that there will eventually be somebody to come in at National Fatherhood Initiative and take over from me and take this organization to the next level, or whatever direction it's going to head. But 15, 20 years from now, like I said, I just hope that the need for this awareness raising that we're still having to do around this issue will not be necessary, and that we'll have figured out what we need to do to continue to have the most impact on fathers and families.
Yeah. So yeah, we hope for the same thing, and we believe in the same thing. Listen, it's already in my head, like sunset. Like, what are you doing, Kenny? Like, where are we going with this? Like, can't do this forever. Like, so where does the sunset happen with respect to
Yeah.
Fathers Incorporated? So that's already a part of my daily thought process. As I, like you, have grandkids, I'm looking at them like, I'm not trying to grind myself into the ground. This cause is my cause, but I got babies. I need to be around to kiss when they
Absolutely.
come over to visit. Let's dig into this $154 billion man report. Talk a little bit about the messaging overall. What
Yeah.
are you trying to ensure that before people even open up the cover, that this is what you're going to get?
Yeah, you're going to get really two things. You're going to get the shock value of how
Mm,
much money we're spending on conservatively at the federal level. This has nothing to do with what we're spending at the state level or any other programs that support father absent households, for which we can't tie family structure to the proportion of money in these different programs that's being spent. So
mm,
these are 14 of the most expensive programs that we have at the federal level. And the shock value is, wow. I mean, that spending has increased, and this is adjusted for inflation, by over 50% since
Wow.
2008.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. So
Mhm.
that's the first thing. The second thing is the importance of both investing in fathers to reduce the reliance of those families on public support while supporting those families at the same time. You
Mhm.
know, one of the things that we hear in the media, and we often hear in public discourse in legislatures around the country, is this struggle between, you know, providing the kind of support that families need to keep children out of poverty, and at the same time trying to prevent as many children from falling into poverty as possible. And
Mhm.
so we're really arguing that these are two tactics that are designed to accomplish the same thing. And that
Mhm.
is we need to continue to support these families at whatever level of support they need. At the same time, we need to be investing dollars in helping fathers to be involved in the lives of their family, regardless of the circumstance that they find themselves in, and regardless of family structure. And so we can do both of those things at the same time. And so there are a lot of details in the report, as you know, Ken. You know, specific recommendations around specific programs, and that only, you know, just touches the surface of things, because one of the things that we hope that this report will do is spark additional debate, additional ideas around what can happen to move the needle down, if you will, in terms of how much money that we're spending to address essentially all of these symptoms, and we really do focus on poverty as being a key piece in the report. So those are really the kind of the two things that
Reading it, who should be shocked the most and why? Policymakers, legislators, practitioners, fathers, who should be shocked the most and
yeah,
why?
I really think it's legislators and policymakers.
Mm.
I think that's who should be shocked the most. They probably know, if they've been around long enough, that we are spending a lot of money supporting these families. But until you actually see the numbers, it's difficult to fathom exactly how much money we're spending in that area. I think practitioners are going to find this useful, as you point out in your article about the report, Ken, that
Mhm.
they're going to find it useful in opening funding opportunities, both public and, I hope, private. That's
Mhm.
the other audience that I hope really is impacted by this report, is the philanthropic community. Because
Mhm.
one of the things that is so hard to do in this work, when you're providing direct services, and I know you know this, is raising money
Yeah.
to support the programming and other resources that fathers need.
Mhm.
It's really difficult. You know, one of the things that we did has happened at National Fatherhood Initiative over the years is our business model has evolved from one that was the sort of traditional nonprofit model, where we had individual donors, we had some government contracts, we had foundations funding us, so that about nine out of every $10 that we generated in revenue came from those types of sources. But
Mhm.
it was very difficult to sustain and maintain that, because as a
Mm.
capacity building organization, we are not providing the kinds of direct services that funders love to fund.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we realized that we needed to kind of flip that model on its head, and it caused us to go in a direction where we started to focus much more on a fee for service model, where um, nine out of every $10 of revenue we generate now comes from the sales of training, technical assistance, and programming. And we use the revenue that we generate from those sources to provide lots of free programming, technical assistance, and all of the things that we do at no charge to organizations across the country.
Hmm.
Um, so my point being here, and I kind of went off on
No,
down
you
a
good?
little rabbit hole, but my point being that because so many funders like to fund direct service programs, this gives those programs a tool where they can say, look, this is the impact this is one of the impacts that you're going to be able to have in funding us to do this work is you're going to help us move the needle in terms of reducing the reliance of these families on public, on taxpayer dollars, essentially.
Yeah, I remember saying this when I saw the $100 billion man report, and I thought it again when I saw this one. And I said to myself, Christopher, I wonder how many people would look at this and say, yeah, but it's justified spending because we're helping moms. And the reason that we have to spend all this money is because dads aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. Well, and that is one of the challenges in living in a culture like ours that focuses so much on individual responsibility
Mm,
and doesn't understand and doesn't grasp the importance of the impact of the environment in which we all live on our behavior. And so
mhm,
when you grow up in a culture that stresses individual responsibility, you attribute almost all individual behavior to the individual, and you don't understand the impact of the environment on that individual's behavior. So this
mhm,
is one of the reasons why we need father-friendly policies and social norms that send the message to fathers day in and day out, no matter where they go, that the most important thing you can do as a father is to be involved in the lives of your children. So we have to create the structure and the infrastructure to support that particular behavior. So that that money is justified because we need to support these families, because when we don't, we end up paying the piper farther
mhm,
down the road in a
mhm,
much larger way than the money that we're spending. But again, as I said earlier, with this report, we're really talking about the importance of investing in fathers as a way to reduce the reliance of those families. And I think that's where we really are trying to hone in here, Ken, to your
mhm,
point. We're trying to cut through all the noise. We're
mhm.
trying to cut through all the noise and say that the signal here is involves those two things.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that I've been trying to figure out how to do more of, I just don't have time to do it. And I'm sure you get these calls too. You get a call from someone who says, hey, I want to start a fatherhood organization in my community. And it's like, where do I start? Right. And it's kind of like, that's a good question. Where do you start? I think the better question is, where are you trying to go? Because I think once you tell me where you're trying to go, I can tell you what the viability is of you being able to be successful in getting to where you're going. Because
Yeah,
this work is not easy. I tell people all the time, this is not hard work, this is heart work. And if your heart isn't in it, you're not going to have the stamina to pull it all the way through. Because unfortunately, from a philanthropic giving point of view, we are still below puppies, kittens, trees, seals, rainforests, and anything else you can come when it comes to philanthropic giving. And so you're not going to get people. It's one of the struggles we have diversified tremendously over the years. But the area, to your point, that we still struggle in is in that philanthropic, corporate, and individual giving space, right?
right.
Where folks are, they'll give you the tools and the fuse. You'll get a $25 one here, you'll possibly get a $500 one here every now and a blue moon, but there is no constant bombardment of checks coming in where people have a heart for men, right? In any way. And I always am curious about that because almost everybody has a son or an uncle or a grandfather or a father. It's like, how can you not have a compassionate heart for men when you have compassionate men in your circle who you're compassionate for? But somehow we separate those two things. People in our minds think that the men in my close and personal space is different from men, right? And I have to look at them very differently. You talked earlier also about, um, the infrastructure. And so one of the other things that I've seen, and tell me where you continue to see this when we're talking about practitioners and we're talking about organizations, because you work with a lot of organizations. So I often wonder, Christopher, when you look at the organizations that you work with, what is the number of turnovers that happen for you? Meaning that you go
Oh,
in, someone calls, they want to run a program, and then a year later you call back and they're not there anymore.
they're not there. And this happens at all levels, Ken. It happens, at the state level, and it happens at the regional and local levels. We've got partners. So the organizations we work with, we call partners because we couldn't have the impact that we have without the work that they're doing with
Mm,
our resources. And so the turnover is rapid in most of these organizations.
mm,
And that's one of the reasons why a few years ago we created a position called Chief Partner Success Officer, that was filled by one of our longest serving employees, Eric Vasari, who you may know.
yes.
Um, because what we were noticing was we would work with a partner and help them to get up to speed in terms of what they wanted to do around fatherhood programming. And then we wouldn't hear from them
Mm,
for a long time. Then we go back, we try to recontact them, and no one, the person wasn't there anymore, and maybe the
mm,
fatherhood program wasn't there anymore. So we created this position to help nurture those relationships along. So similar to an account executive in the for-profit space, we learned from what is successful in the for-profit community in terms of establishing long-term relationships with customers and nurturing those so they could continue to build their capacity over time. And we've
mm,
started to see this so that now, I mean, we can't do anything as far as this turnover goes. I mean, people move on, and for a variety of reasons, people get let go or whatever. But what we could do was we could be proactive in maintaining contact
mm,
with some of our most impactful partners. And so that's one of the ways that we've been able to continue to help some of our partners grow over time, despite the turnover that we see in staff. Um, so, one of the things that we have attempted to do, and we've been successful in some cases and not in others, is back to this culture change perspective piece that I mentioned with these organizations. So, one of the key tools that we have in National Fatherhood Initiative is called the Father Friendly Checkup, and it's all about helping organizations to identify what they need to do to change their culture to support uh, proactive engagement of fathers on a continual basis, so that they start to do things policy and procedure wise that build father engagement into the very DNA of the organizations, so
mm,
that if people move on, they move new people in to do the work that's so important with fathers, rather than that person leaving. Because what we so often see, and this is still the case today, is one passionate person in
right.
that organization, right? You've seen this.
Yeah.
Um, they say, "Gosh, we're not doing enough." And I can't tell you how many times I've heard this story. Someone calls me up and says, "Look, I want to start this fatherhood program," and I talk to them. I try to find out what they want to do with this, and they say to me, Chris, we're just not doing anything. Nobody really wants to engage fathers. I've made this commitment to do this. And they
Mhm.
just kind of like a hammer, just barrel through and establish something. But then they eventually leave
Right.
and the work goes. So that's why the culture change piece is so important. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's one of the most frustrating things that I've encountered over the years is just it's like we're working with a bucket and we want to try to fill that bucket with more and more work at the local level,
Mhm.
which is where it needs to happen, and we've still got some holes in the bottom of that bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always going to be the case. But the key is, how do we reduce that as much as possible? And I think it's through the organizational culture change aspect,
Mm-hmm.
because you know when you look at the research on the effectiveness of our programs and resources and just the feedback that we get, it's absolutely wonderful and it's great. But
Mm-hmm.
unless the organization is committed culturally to this work,
Yeah.
I mean, I've got our curricula. I mean, every single edition behind me
Mm-hmm.
in my office, and they're only as good as their ability to be implemented by organizations that are committed to this work.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the impact really happens. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that all of us who are doing this work, and you're to be applauded, Kim, because you're not only doing the work at the local level, but you're doing it at the national level. We
Mm-hmm.
need to just keep hammering home the importance of creating an infrastructure in this country that supports fathers' individual behavior,
Mm-hmm.
the type of individual behavior that we want to see, which is emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and physical involvement,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the circumstance that a father finds himself in.
Yeah, I've been for years trying to figure out how to steer this cruise liner that is the clearinghouse in spaces where we become more of a capacity sustainer of the field, right? And so we do great in a lot of different spaces. But in terms of expansiveness of what the clearinghouse was originally intended to be and what it is now, we do a great job in those places, but we've had difficulty in moving outside of the box that I've wanted to move
Yeah,
outside,
yeah.
because the ground keeps shifting beneath my feet, right? Every time I think I got it can move, the ground shifts, and then I have to start over. This the main part remains the main part, right? It keeps moving because it's stable. But it's like, what about the new part? I remember um when you all had it in the beginning, there was an element of OFA that allowed them to provide smaller grants for a. That's how I met you when I was with the state of New York. That's how I met NFI. I came down and took the curriculum training and went through all of the NFI stuff. That was incredible because it gave me the baseline of understanding the work that I was doing at the New York State level, because I was in charge of grantees throughout the state of New York. And so it gave me a baseline to work from. And so I often wonder, how can the federal government play that role again, where there are some state agencies that are playing it. Ohio is the one that jumps off the top of my head first. Um,
Absolutely.
Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida, and then
Oklahoma's another state that a lot of people don't know about, that's doing some really great work in the fatherhood space.
yeah,
Very, very effective work as well.
but that's four. That's five we just named. It's
Yeah,
50
yeah,
states.
exactly. I know. And I'll point to you've hit the nail on the head for me in terms of one of the maybe three most frustrating things that I experienced in
Mm,
doing this work. So, as for your watchers and listeners who don't know, National Fatherhood Initiative had the contract for the clearinghouse for the first 5 years,
mhm,
and there was a dual contract that we had at the same time, which was the National Responsible Fatherhood Capacity Building Initiative.
yes.
So we
Mhm,
had a separate pot of money that was designated to building that capacity that's so needed in organizations. And so we gave out mini grants to entities that we worked with intensely for a year to build their capacity in a customized fashion.
mhm,
And it was very successful. I mean, the evaluation feedback that we got on that particular initiative was excellent. But for whatever reason, the federal government decided not to fund it again. And in fact, The initial rounds of funding, and I am blanking now on the most recent cycle of funding. Ken, you know more about this than I do, but those initial rounds of funding prohibited the funding to be used for capacity building.
Mm, mhm, mm,
I mean, so you had a lot of organizations that were getting this funding,
mhm,
doing programming in this vacuum where
mm,
there was a lack of capacity building to help them
mhm,
be successful.
mhm, mhm.
And so I agree. I think that is one thing that we have encouraged the federal government to do, and other leaders, is to apply more funding once again to capacity building. The other piece that so when they decided not to fund another cycle for that capacity building initiative, I was personally devastated because I, the feedback that I was getting from individuals and organization staff like you experienced with that capacity building initiative was just thank you for this. I mean, people were so thirsty and hungry for this
Mhm,
capacity building assistance,
mhm,
and people who are starting out this work are just as hungry for that kind of assistance. And if there was an effort, a concerted effort at the national level around that capacity building, I think that would be a very, very good role for the clearinghouse as well. I
mhm.
mean, the clearinghouse has done some really good capacity building work over the years, but my guess is that it hasn't done more because that's not been the primary emphasis.
Right. And the
Yeah,
budget has gone up and down, and it continues
yeah,
over the years. You know, it's gone down, 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 down. And so, and we're continuing to excel in the work that we're doing, but the money's going down, 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 down.
yeah.
I
And
think that we are in a space right now, to be honest with you, as we close, of opportunity to present new ideas that will allow us to be able to do some of the stuff that we're talking about. I just haven't figured out the who yet and how to get into those spaces to have those conversations, because I think you said earlier and you talked earlier about the work that you've done and the importance that this particular administration has on marriage. That's, to me, that's an opportunity space. It's not the only space, it's just an
okay.
opportunity space,
Mhm,
right? It's a space for us to step into if the messaging is right, right? Because the messaging for
mhm.
me when it comes to marriage and fatherhood is marriage works great as a journey. It doesn't work so great as a destination. So you can't walk in telling dads they need to get married. That doesn't work. But if you can build their capacity, give them the tools, give them the things that put them on a journey to committed relationships with the mothers of their children, the hope at the end of the day is they might get married. But if they don't, they at least have the tools to they at least have the tools to continue to commit to co-parenting in a healthy way. That's what we're trying to get, because the goal at the end of the day for Fathers Incorporated is not building the capacity of fathers. It is building better environments for the well-being of our children. We just happen to do it through building the capacity of fathers.
Right, right. Yeah, and articulated your position very well in your article about the report, Ken. You focused on stability.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
marriage is great, and it's good when it's healthy, and that's one of the things we talk about at National Fatherhood Initiative. We're not bashful about promoting the benefits of marriage for fathers, for mothers, for children. I mean, the research is very clear on that. But we also know that just being married is not enough. That marriage needs to be healthy, it needs to thrive. And we
Hmm.
also know that not every couple is going to choose marriage for themselves. And so we need to provide them with the same, you know, relationship, communication, co-parenting, all of that help that married couples need. But I do
Hmm.
think marriage is a lever. So, for example, the Texas legislature just formed the Texas Marriage Commission,
Hmm.
and I've been talking with them because they have a number of committees that are a part of that marriage commission, and one of those is on fatherhood. And so I met with them just a couple of weeks ago to talk with the person that they've tapped to run that fatherhood piece. And so they're recognizing the importance of doing this work as well as part of that broader effort to strengthen marriage in the state. So I agree with you. I think it's a lever, but I think the messaging is very important because both in terms of how we talk about marriage to fathers, so that they don't just recoil,
They
right?
don't run.
But they don't run, but they're open to it.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
they're open to it. But
yeah,
also, I think it's important for practitioners to address the issue of marriage and not go into doing that with some view that marriage is not right for these different people.
right.
That's one of the things that, so in our 24/7 dad curriculum, for example, we do talk about the benefits of marriage and how that can be the right choice for a father. But we have some practitioners who will absolutely not touch it.
Right.
They absolutely won't talk about marriage, and that's their choice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I've done some research around why that occurs, what comes back is this view that somehow marriage is not right for a specific population or a specific type of dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's their choice. And I think it's incumbent upon us to present that as an option and to talk about how do you make that work. And then ultimately, we let those individuals decide what's best for themselves.
Yeah. Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. I appreciate what you bring to the space. The lane that you are in, the goals that you're trying to accomplish, the philosophies that you use. Um, I'll continue to say that this field needs stability. Um, National Fatherhood Initiative is one of the stable pieces of the responsible fatherhood field. You guys have been here for it, like you said, forever, longer than I have. And so, but stability is what we need right now. And so we don't need a whole lot of shifting. We need to figure out how do we take what we have, stabilize it so that we can continue to serve families. Tell people how to get in touch with you and the National Fatherhood Initiative and how they can find you.
Yeah, so we have a very simple URL. It's fatherhood.org, and we also have an e-commerce site where you can learn about all of our resources. That's fathersource.org, and you can go to either website and get to the other one. Again, we are very much a capacity building organization. So if you're interested in starting or improving a fatherhood program, that's why we're here. That's why we exist, is to help organizations to both be intentional and proactive about engaging fathers and taking a true whole family approach to the work that they do.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for listening to I Am Dad podcast. Again, I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. You know how I like to leave you. Always be kind to others as you are kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend and mentor, Art Mitchell, always said to me, Kenny, it's nice to be important, but it's much more important to be nice. Until next Sunday, take care of yourself, be safe, and peace out.
Who we do it for the children, who we live it for the vision, who we stand with now, with each other. Say it loud, say it proud. I'm dad, or I am dad. The journey's clear. Voices of fathers the world will hear. Hope and strength in all we do. I am dad, and so are you.